Hello everyone, welcome back. I haven't talked about James Bond in a while, and No Time to Die seemed to signal the end of the previous generation of Bond films in the fact that they basically killed off James Bond. They blew him up, they shot him, he's dead. It's kind of appropriate that that generation of Bond was brought to a definitive close. And most of you know this, Amazon bought MGM, which basically owns the James Bond franchise, amongst other things. They paid billions for it. And despite the ending of No Time to Die, there is going to be a new James Bond movie coming out in the next few years. But this new James Bond movie will obviously be set in a new continuity. And it's a fresh start for Amazon because for the first time in over 60 years, the James Bond film will be produced by someone other than the Broccoli family. Producer Albert R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman started the Bond franchise 60 years ago with Dr. No. The whole James Bond franchise has been a family affair. And that all ended a few years ago when Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson sold the rights to the James Bond franchise. They're out, they're done. And it's a huge change in the history of Bond because for the first time ever, an American company, a conglomerate, will be producing James Bond. And understandably so, Bond fans everywhere are concerned because this is going to be the first James Bond film produced outside the Broccoli family, but also simply because of the fact that it's Amazon. In this era that we're living in now, this politically correct era, can a James Bond movie really be made in the current climate? Especially by Amazon, the same company that gave us Rings of Power and Wheel of Time, just completely feminized woke garbage of classic fantasy literature, and countless other woke TV shows and movies. And recently, these concerns came to a head when Amy Pascal, the producer of the new James Bond film, offered these thoughts when she was asked in a recent interview about Bond. And she says, "I would say the end of the year is a good bet. We are being really, really methodical, having worked with Barbara Broccoli at the studio. I mean, Daniel Craig is a hard act to follow, and it's got to be something really different that is as stirring and exciting and different." And the reaction to this article on social media, as you can expect, was pretty fiery. Even before this article came out, people are worried that they're going to make James Bond woke, that they're going to make him gay, that they're going to cast Pedro Pascal, same difference, that they're going to feminize him, because James Bond is probably the most classically masculine, tough guy, action hero in popular fiction. He's tough, he lives the good life, he drives fast cars, he beds beautiful women, he smokes cigars. What's the old saying? He's the man every man wants to be and every woman wants to be with. And what really got people's eyebrows raised in a Roger Moore type fashion, it's going to be radically different, and that's really got people worried. And I have to say to that, I think we should be cautiously optimistic about what Amazon are doing. We shouldn't panic just yet. And my opinion is that there's a very good chance that the new James Bond movie, that the new direction they're going in, is going to be pretty good. For a number of reasons. Number one, they're taking their time with this. Amazon spent billions acquiring MGM. And you can bet the primary reason for that was the fact that they had James Bond. Stargate as well, but that's another story. A very controversial story as it turns out. With that kind of money, you'd think that they would try to honor the franchise. Well, naysayers will say that they spent billions on Lord of the Rings, and look how the Rings of Power turned out. I've never watched it, but it looks terrible, and most Tolkien fans say that it's awful. But I want you all to consider this. Amazon acquired the rights to this 3 or 4 years ago, and they are really, really taking their time with this. They've gotten a great director in Denis Villeneuve to direct the new film. He's the director who gave us the Dune movies, Arrival, very solid director. And they've got Stephen Knight, the same writer who wrote Peaky Blinders, Spartacus, the Netflix version of Daredevil. So you've got a very good pedigree there. The wheels are turning very slowly, and of course, they haven't cast the new James Bond yet. But these are good signs because in comparison to Disney, when they acquired the rights to Star Wars in, 2012, 2013, they couldn't wait to get new Star Wars movies out the door. They had The Force Awakens out 2 years after that sale. But Amazon, they could have easily pushed to get a new James Bond film in theaters as soon as that deal went through. But no, they're taking their time with this. So that's a good sign. The other reason is, despite their reputation for producing woke TV shows and movies, Amazon have hit the target with other adaptations, specifically Reacher. And they've done a pretty good job overall with that series by adapting it to television. It helps, of course, that Lee Childs, the creator of Jack Reacher, is heavily involved. And it's the same with The Terminal List. The Terminal List, which is based on ex-Navy SEAL Jack Carr, I think his name is, that's one of the best shows I have ever seen. Literally in the last decade. If you haven't seen The Terminal List, it's absolutely fantastic. The first season came out a few years ago, and it's only now that the season 2 is on the way. But it's going to be well worth waiting for, because if it's even half as good as the first season, I'm looking forward to it. But again, that's another great adaptation of a very good book series. And finally, the one thing I want to really touch on is the fact that fans are really honing in on the fact that Amy Pascal said that it's going to be a radically different take. And people are concerned about that it's not going to be James Bond anymore. But really, when you come to think about it, when you look at the history of Bond, when you look at all the actors who have played James Bond over the decades, from Connery to Moore to Lazenby, Dalton, Brosnan, and Craig, each actor who has played James Bond has provided a very different portrayal as the title character. It's important to remember Sean Connery, who is often considered the best. Ian Fleming, the creator of the books, didn't see Connery as a proper interpretation of James Bond. When that actor was cast as James Bond, Ian Fleming was totally against it. It's only after he saw Connery's portrayal that he admitted that he was wrong and actually added Scottish ancestry to the character's backstory in the novels. As great as Connery was, his portrayal was nothing really like the books. Terence Young, who directed the first James Bond film, Dr. No, really deserves the lion's share of the credit for that portrayal by Sean Connery, because he's the one who really schooled him in the art of being suave and sophisticated and all that. And then when you look at Lazenby, he was completely different to Connery. Roger Moore, he's nothing like Connery. Again, they're playing the same character, but it's a radically different take. Whereas Sean Connery was tough, Roger Moore, you wouldn't really describe him as tough. Roger Moore's portrayal is lighthearted. He's very funny. He's very entertaining. And I love them both. I love Sean Connery's interpretation. I love Roger Moore's interpretation. And then when Dalton came along in 1987, a lot of diehard fans of the Fleming novels have said that Timothy Dalton really is the character from the books. And then you have Pierce Brosnan, who in my opinion was a perfect balance between Connery and Moore, which is not to take away anything that he did. He brought his own charm to it. He made it his own. But again, he was a fantastic Bond as well. And then you come to Daniel Craig, whose portrayal, again, was very different from what came before. His portrayal was probably the most different so far in terms of his backstory, because his first movie, Casino Royale, was a complete reboot of the continuity from the previous generations. I think even his backstory was different, because classically in the novels, James Bond's backstory is that he was a commander in the Royal Navy. And I think there's lip service given to Casino Royale, the movie, that Daniel Craig's James Bond is actually ex-Special Forces. And I'm one of the people who didn't like the idea of him playing Bond in the first place. But I grew to like his portrayal as the movies went on, even though the movies varied in quality. But again, a very, very different portrayal. So the point I'm making is we really shouldn't panic about Amy Pascal's comments about the new James Bond being different. Do we really want the new James Bond to be a copycat of Connery, of Moore, of Dalton? No. Whichever actor they choose to play the new Bond should have the basic characteristics. He should be tall, tough, good looking, good with action, smooth with the ladies, which all the other Bonds had in common. But again, it was a different portrayal. The basics should be there, but the portrayal should be different from what came before. It shouldn't be a copy of what we've seen before. I think the recent James Bond game, First Light, is a very good indication of what direction they're going to go in. The fact that he's a young Bond. Those concerns about feminizing Bond or making fun of his masculinity are going to be there. But I think if Amazon are smart, they know that they have to get it right. As I said, they're taking their time with this. The wheels are turning slowly, and that's a good sign. So hopefully this new generation of Bond will have all the classic elements, and I really hope that we get back to the fun aspect and that they should be standalone adventures rather than trying to build a character arc across 4 or 5 films. But I do hope that Amazon are smart enough to know that they make Bond masculine. Look, he's not going to be smoking cigarettes, obviously, but he's a killer. He's tough. This is another concern people have in the fact that the Bond girls won't be Bond girls anymore, that they're going to be tough, no-nonsense women. But the simple fact is we've had tough, no-nonsense Bond girls in Bond movies in the past. Some of my favourite Bond girls are Michelle Yeoh in Tomorrow Never Dies, or Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. They were strong in their own way, but they were still feminine. So let's not panic just yet. Let's hope for the best and hope James Bond will be back on our screens before too long, more or less intact. So anyway, what do you think? Do you think James Bond's future is doomed in the current era? Or do you think they're going to knock it out of the park and satisfy the legions of James Bond fans over the decades, an entire new generation of Bond fans? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Share this video out there. And I'll see you all next time.